All right. So it's really great to see you both, and also everybody else. These, also for the records, these workshops series are sponsored by the Center for Foreign Policy and Peace Research, and which is part of the Sam Doğramacı Peace Foundation, and its journal actually, All Azimuth, and it very much fits the mission and even the founding mission of our journal, which is to basically bridge the, in a sense, global south, or we call it periphery, with the core of knowledge, IR knowledge. At the time we started the journal, this was the written mission, but later it became almost like the, de facto, one of the de facto big missions in the discipline. So, I really, so in that sense, it's extremely critical that we do these things, and I'm very grateful to all the participants. This is the third of these workshops, and we're going to do one last the upcoming weeks. And that's fine. I really would like to thank those at the center who've been arranging this series, and Efe and other colleagues. So we have two speakers, two contributors. Cyanne Loyle, actually, I'll start with her introducing, and then Seden Akçınaroğlu. Cyanne is an associate professor at Penn State and a global fellow at the Peace Research Institute, Oslo. And her current research focuses on transitional justice adopted during and after armed conflict. And she published in several journals such as Conflict Management and Peace Science, ISQ, Journal of Conflict Resolution, Journal of Peace Research, and Journal of Human Rights. And we have also Seden Akçınaroğlu. She's a professor in Binghamton University, and her main interest lies in unraveling the linkages between expectations, informational problems, learning and strategic action, and the dynamics of civil wars or rivalries. And she's also been publishing in journals like Journal of Conflict Resolution, Peace Research, Journal of Peace Research, Conflict Management, Peace Science, again, PSQ, and International Interactions. Each will have 15 minutes. That's kind of how we're running, to respond to the questions they received. I have a copy of those questions as well, but I won't repeat. And following which, we will have another half an hour for additional questions from me and from also the audience. And the idea, I really like the format. The idea is to really eventually put together whatever we've been discussing in the structured way, so that it could be a forum article, and conflict studies in this case being the kind of focused case for this global IR debate we are having in the discipline. So now we can start, and the floor is yours, Cyanne.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. I prepared a short PowerPoint for us that helps to structure my thinking. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, first I wanted to start by thanking the Center for the opportunity to reflect on these questions. So this is something that I have thought a lot about, and I incorporate a lot of what I'm calling research engagement between the North and South partners, which I core or periphery, kind of however you want to think about it. But for me, I tend to think about it in terms of kind of the area in which I am housed, in this case, the United States, and then other places in which there are interesting and pertinent research questions that I want to engage with, either from a conflict perspective or from a broader IR perspective. And so again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to kind of think through these questions and put them forward in my head in a more structured way. And I will say that this is one of the first times that I've really had the opportunity to reflect on it specifically in this format. So I welcome kind of questions and pushback on some of the ways that I've set this up. So in reflecting on the idea of cooperation, I actually think that when we think about kind of cross-national collaboration, I like to think about it in terms of research engagements. And my kind of first cut on thinking through these topics, I think there are kind of three main models that I have both seen engaged in the global research community, but also that I myself have engaged in. And so I've had some opportunity over the course of my career to kind of focus on which of these models I prefer, but also which of these models I think is most relevant or pertinent for different types of research questions or different types of projects in general. I've been collaborating globally, oh gosh, for about 20 years now, and have done that mostly in East Africa, so in Rwanda and Uganda. I've done work in Turkey and Nepal, in Northern Ireland, and also I have a new project in Mozambique. And so I don't know, it's one of the reasons I pull away a little bit from the kind of north-south dichotomy, because I think that we can really think about these research engagements much more broadly. And so I wanted to kind of walk through with you this morning for me, or this evening for you, these kind of three models that I've laid out. So first is the contract model. And the contract model, I think, is the one that historically we would be most familiar with. And I think of the contract model in terms of a more transactional research agenda. So this is when you have a scholar, in my example, a kind of a US-based researcher that then hires a think tank in a different location or a different country to complete a research task for them. So the example that I give is a project that I ran in Nepal, in which I contracted a think tank, a Nepalese think tank, to conduct focus groups for me. So basically, I sent the questions and they sent back kind of recordings of the research information that I was interested in. And there are some benefits to this, right? So I think that for the host, I guess I don't know what my terms would be. In this case, the US-based partner, right? I think that the benefits for that person is that it really can broaden the reach of the research. So if you have a scholar who may be unfamiliar with a particular case or unable to travel themselves, this kind of contract model allows you to get data from a location that you yourself would not engage in. I also think it has the benefits of engaging the skills of resident research firms. So in this case, the Nepalese think tank was very well situated and connected in order to kind of conduct the focus groups that I needed for a particular project. And then certainly there's the benefits of time and money. So if researchers are not moving their own teams all around the world to conduct research, often it can be cheaper and more efficient to conduct research in this way. So I laid out the benefits, but I also think that we should reflect on some of the costs, or rather some of the cons is probably the better way to say it. So in this model, you have a research team that is kind of collecting or engaging with research material or data that they themselves have not collected. I don't want to demonize this model because I think it's not dissimilar to engaging other people's cross-national data collection efforts, right? So when we use the UCDP data or the correlates of war data, we ourselves have not collected it, but rather we're engaging for reasons of time and money, somebody else's skills to provide us with this data. And so I think the contract model has historically been quite popular and prominent, and does have some benefits, but we should certainly reflect on the costs, which is particularly as we veer towards more qualitative research, the researcher who is developing the theory and engaging with the data has themselves not been part of the data generation process. The second model that I want to lay out for us is the collaboration model. And this was and I think this is one of the ones that I've really been enjoying a lot recently. And this is when you can engage complementary research skills on a similar project, but not actually be asking the same research questions. And the example I have of this is if, for example, you had a US and a Turkish-based researcher who cost shared a national survey in Turkey. And FA and I actually had the opportunity to do this a few years ago. And one of the things that was really nice about this model is that it allowed both of us to extend our resources, but we maintained independent spheres of research. And so this was not about collaborating on the same research questions. This was only about collaborating in terms of the data collection method. And so both of us were able to add our own blocks of questions, our own modules onto a national survey, and we're really able to benefit in that way. So in terms of kind of benefits for both parties here, we can extend resources. And I should add that this is quite common, even if we're not talking about Global North and Global South partners, right? So we have research survey collaborations all the time, and it extends the resources of both parties and allows both researchers to be able to engage in deeper research or more extensive research than they potentially could have funded on their own. I mentioned already the independent spheres of research. So it allows both of the research partners to really kind of do the work that they want to be doing without overlap. But I do also think that that the collaboration really benefits from being informed by alternative perspectives. So in the case that I gave, we had two political scientists that were working on a similar within a kind of similar realm of IR and conflict studies, but you can even think about these sort of collaborations being interdisciplinary. And so there's no reason that they would have to be within the same field. And so now the conversations around, in this case, how to design a survey or how to structure a research project can be informed by alternative perspectives. So whether they be interdisciplinary or not, the researchers can really, I think, benefit on a whole by engaging with each other across broader topics. And then the last model I wanted to offer up for us this evening is the cooperation model. And this is a model in which scholars have complementary research objectives. So the way I think about that is that they are working on the same project, right? They have the same research questions, they have the same research goals. And an example of that is a project that I'm currently running in Mozambique. We have a research team there that is also thinking about and engaging with very similar questions to the questions that my team is asking around issues of climate change and global conflict. In this case, the insurgency, the Al-Shabaab, ISIS-affiliated insurgency in northern Mozambique. And so both partners are engaged on a single project. In our case, we have slightly different outcome objectives. So the partners that we're engaged with in Mozambique tend to be a little bit more public facing. And so the outcomes that they're interested in are Mozambican policy and policy briefs, slightly separate from academic articles, but there are some real benefits to this model. So again, I would highlight cost share. So anytime we have collaboration, we have the opportunity to kind of smooth out in some ways the incredibly high cost of engaging in high quality research. But we also, in this case, have research that's informed by multiple skill sets and multiple experiences. Our team is certainly able to take advantage of the highly skilled experiences of the Mozambican team, as well as the local kind of cultural knowledge and experience. But the Mozambican team is also able to engage with the experiences of our research team. So one example of that is that the research center we're working with has never conducted a national survey before. But Danielle Zhang from Emory University, who is part of our team, has run many surveys in the Global South. And so she's bringing that skills and that skill and those skill sets to the Mozambican team. And we're actually running kind of information dissemination workshops for that think tank. Or that research center to help them think about how not only would they help us run a national survey, but how they would be able to continue to build on that into the future. And I do think that this cooperation model produces stronger research for all scholars. So I think that the Mozambican team is informed by the global expertise of the kind of US-based team, but the US-based team is learning a lot, both in terms of research design and also content from the Mozambican team. So I want to lay those kind of three models out there. I'm sure that there are more and other ones that people have engaged in. And I also want to be clear that I don't know that one is better or worse. I think they fit different times and different types of research projects. But in reflecting on what some of those engagements could could look like, and I'm not going to say should look like, but some of the things that those engagements could look like, it's really been a pleasure for me to kind of think through that model. So with that, Seden, I'll turn it over to you, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect on these questions.
Thank you, Cyanne. Thank you also for the typology. Actually, that gives a kind of good starting perspective. Now, Seden.
Oh yeah, I also have slides. So are we going to do this? Yeah, you talked so nicely. It was such a great personal experience. I just almost don't want to speak up right now. Was I supposed to send you the slides? I'm not sure. Can you make me a co-host? And I have some slides too. At least let me show some slides. All right, let me see. All right. Can everybody see what's happening in here? Great, lovely. So yeah, my only personal experience is from Turkey, but I'm gonna take you somewhere else to a little bit more pessimistic perspective, I guess. All right, so I collected some data yesterday. That was my day. Getting myself, my hands dirty with some data collection to see what was actually happening in here, because really this kind of workshop made me think on a topic that I hadn't thought before. And because I was from Turkey, I really wasn't aware of the depth of the problem in here, because I could easily go to Turkey and do these kind of studies and surveys, and FA is one of my co-authors, so I didn't have this difficulty. So what I did was, obviously, given the limited amount of time, I just coded all the articles that I could find on the Journal of Conflict Resolution, Journal of Peace Research, two of the great high-impact conflict journals from 2022 to 2024, which amounted to 18 issues in JCR, 135 articles, 12 issues in JPR, and 100 articles. And then I went ahead and tried to code every article that had a micro level study. So this could be a micro level data or some kind of local survey. And the number, as you can see, is 89. That's not so bad. 38% of micro level study could be better because of all the problems that we're facing. So this is a very there's a huge selection bias in here, because a lot of people would want to do the local or a micro level data, but they don't have access to it. But so 38% of these studies had some kind of micro level study. And 65 out of these 89, nearly 73% were contexts that actually existed in the South. So that's not too bad. So where are these studies? This is a very general map. As you can see, there are a lot of places that are not blue in here. Especially when you think about the conflict context of the Middle East and about Africa, I was really surprised to see that there are a lot of empty spaces in these conflict zones. So there are not enough scholars actually studying these zones at a local level. So a little bit more going deeper into it, as you can see, UK is still one of those very highly studied contexts. If we go to former communist bloc, obviously right now it's Russia and Ukraine. If we go to Africa, you can see we have, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 countries in here, but there's only one study about each one of them. And we know what a conflict zone this is. This is a geographical area where we, really want to do a deeper research, where we want to have a local context, local research, but it's not done. In the same way, Middle East, there's a huge number of scholars who are studying Iraq. That's normal because there's a lot of data on there, and obviously Israel. But apart from that, it's still lacking. This is interesting. As you can see, I was very surprised that we had a lot of studies in Colombia, and then I came up with an explanation of why that is happening, and that is for later. So this is a very broad understanding of the micro level studies around the world. So let me bring you some more statistics now. So then I went ahead and coded all these studies where there was a North-North collaboration, North-North collaboration from the same country, North-North collaboration altogether, North-South collaboration. And as you can see, there was only one South-to-South collaboration. When it was just an SS collaboration, they could not make it to these two journals. There was only one article that could make it to these journals. So this is a very pessimistic perspective. When you look at it, the North-South collaboration is also only 7 out of 89. Most of these are North-North collaborations. What I mean by that is these are scholars working within the Northern universities. Now, I opened that up a little bit. So out of the 52 North-North collaborations, the kind of partnership between European and US scholars are 13%. Most of it's happening within Europe, or most of it's happening within the US. All right, so I was observing that we need to have more micro-level studies in Africa and Middle East, but we're not having enough. And some of the reasons is because scholars want to do these researches, but all they can do, because they're lacking local connections, they're lacking resources, and they're lacking local data. So it's a lot easier to go for large N data and add a few cases to just, get a little bit deeper into your causal mechanism. I know for myself, when I'm doing case studies, and it's not about Turkey, that I get these kind of reviewer responses saying that, well, you're not really getting into the causal mechanism, you're not really getting. I hate that, but it's the utmost truth, because I don't have the details to get into the causal mechanism. And so mine is very much kind of a not going deep, but on the surface kind of a case study, and the reviewers are aware of it. So I did a little bit more digging. So out of these 89 studies, 39 of those, this is very interesting, 43% of these studies had a scholar residing in the North, either in US or in Europe, but was originally from the country in which the micro-level study was conducted. 20 of those, 22% of those, even if it was not a local connection, was a regional connection. For example, someone in Turkey doing a study on Greece, or someone in Germany doing a study in Turkey. So the interesting part, 39 of those were had one person that had knowledge of the micro-level study, which was national of that. When I incorporated this into the new concept of North-South partnership by nationality, then the kind of partnership expanded to 16. What I mean by this is, again, it's very possible that Cyanne is actually co-authoring with FA, who's in Binghamton University. That's good. But it's also possible that Cyanne actually is co-authoring with me, and I am also from Turkey. So I actually have that connection, and I have the local knowledge. So it appears as if this is a North-North collaboration, but in fact, it is not. It's an informally North-South collaboration. So when we accounted for those, there were 16 out of 89. It's not still great, but it is a little bit better partnerships that were happening. If you remember, the old figure was 7, and now with this new kind of expanded concept of cooperation, it was 16. All right, so let me see what else I have in here. And then I went ahead and tried to see what about the rest of them, where they didn't have any kind of local connection, which is one of the co-authors don't have local knowledge, or not one of the people who are residing in the South. What's happening to those? Who are these people? They all have some kind of affiliation with a regional institute. So it's very possible 2 scholars from the US are conducting a study in Turkey, and they don't have a Turkish co-author in any way by nationality or by location, but they belong to, or they're affiliated with, an institute that's doing that is related to Middle East. So if they're doing a study in South Korea, maybe they don't have a South Korean co-author, and maybe not someone who is by location or by nationality Asian, but they are affiliated with an Asian institute. Obviously, this is also a selection bias, because those who are affiliated with these institutes have already some kind of expertise in the area. And some of these scholars, I was very busy looking at CVs yesterday. I guess I know everybody's CV. And so for example, somebody was doing a study in Colombia, and he was an American, and he wasn't working with any co-author who was from Colombia, but he had been an exchange student in Colombia when he was an undergrad. So they had started establishing these kind of connections. All right. So obviously, we all know why we need a North-South collaboration. I mean, we do have communication barriers. There's some contextually sensitive information. A lot of the things we think about resolution, about dynamics, about duration cannot really be understood without understanding the context of it. Even one type of question might be widely different in the context of Turkey, in the context of Afghanistan, in the context of Colombia. And this is the funny part. When we're doing large N data, this is what I figured out. We always try to see how comparable this data is across the nations, right? We try to do some kind of normalization procedure. But when we have these kind of local data, there is absolutely no normalization process. A local data from Turkey is not comparable to a local data from Colombia. I mean, there's absolutely, even if you're asking the same questions, it's just not comparable. There is that, we need this kind of a filtering mechanism in which we can actually interpret the events or the questions or the answers through this kind of a local lens, and we don't know how to do that. So the funny part of it is the North is studying the South, and the South is not incorporated enough in the study of the South. I think that is the essence of it. All right, so what's next? Right, so I looked at the present kind of networks that is allowing the North-South collaboration or in some way for a local person to be incorporated as a co-author. Right now, what's happening is that there are conferences in the North, there are conferences in the South, and this is creating some kind of networks. There's also scholars from the South working in the North. As I've said before, I think this is the most successful and the most existent model so far. And they're working in Northern institutions, but because they have local context, because they have local resources and local networks, they can actually bring that kind of a locally sensitive data into their work. There are also students from the South becoming graduate students in the North, and there's now the Northern universities establishing branches in the South, like the NYU in Shanghai, in NYU. I think Georgetown University has one in Qatar. NYU has one in Abu Dhabi. So there are also these connections or networks where everybody's kind of, meeting people from the South, from the North, and all these collaborations can be happening. These are very individual personal networks, right? I think we need something more. And so I was thinking a little bit about this, and I think there are not enough networks or institutionalized, formalized networks between institutions in the South, like this institution, and institutions in the North. In the same way, there are not enough connections between colleges in the South and colleges in the North. I think these kind of formal networks and collaborations is what is needed. And exchange of scholars, having collaborative projects in which different scholars from different colleges or different institutions can be part of these collaborative projects. I don't know a lot of successful cases that are institutionalized. One that I could find was this Botswana Harvard 8 Institute partnership. It is being funded by the National Institute of Health, which is why it is so successful. They have training, they have research collaboration, they're collecting data together. This is again, a successful case that has been happening since 1996 between an African country and Harvard. But I think we need more of these kind of successful cases, as I said, institutionalized formal collaboration. And maybe we can start encouraging some journals to actually reward micro-level work that include local scholars as co-authors and encourage, kind of exchange of scholars with these kind of institutionalized networks between institutes and colleges between the North and South. And maybe incorporate in these kind of Middle Eastern Institute, Asian Institute centers, We have these in the US, and we bring people of expertise on the Middle East or in Asia to these institutes and centers, but we did not incorporate a lot of experts from the South in these institutes, and I don't know why not. So on that note, I am going to be silent now and let you pose some questions. Thank you. And stop sharing.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. This is really all of this is really beautiful. We started with a great typology, how this thing can be, and as if that wasn't enough, and then Seden brought in a research and data into it.
I was almost going to run an analysis, and
No, but no, it's just this is at its prime, you know. When we no, I'm really thankful to this is also why we have to keep doing it. It's reinvigorating everything that we are trying to do in here. So in that sense, it's beautiful. And I have to tell one thing actually. When I was a graduate student, PhD student, the first piece we published with my wife, actually, my partner, that was on this bibliographic study. In those days, I'm not going to say this, there was no internet almost. There was, but we went into the McGill's library. We brought in all those volumes, the dusted volumes, and looked at the names, where they were from, and then everything, like for 10 years of it. But I remember feeling like, oh my God, maybe I should have gone for, archaeology or something. It tasted better than ever. But the funny thing is, hearing now some of the arguments, I remember the same feeling, like looking at it, oh my God, this person sounds like from the periphery, but very much established in the north, and then living in there. And so then you start getting into the names and everything else. It's a mystery. But by the way, I think it's not a pessimistic picture, it's a realistic picture that we've been seeing it in other parts. You're doing it in the conflict one, but I've been trying to do it in the general IR for several years now. It's a very realistic picture. So, and that's why I think this global IR, whatever that initiative has a strong ground to work on. Okay. Before I waste more time, you guys touched upon several things, but I'm gonna fill in asking a couple of questions, and then I think other people while they are getting ready. I'm gonna get into something even a little bit even more practical that I've been observing. The this theory, the practice problem, particularly in conflict studies. The local institutions who are in the business of countering or doing work in the security challenges, they do resist in the South, particularly in the periphery, against the knowledge, against the so-called scientific knowledge. We've been seeing it. It doesn't get into their table to implement. It is generally whatever they've been seeing it, they would go for it. So I was wondering really, what might be the best way of the two groups of academics, North, South, working together to translate or to repackage the so-called northern knowledge in a way that the southern practitioners would be more accepting of it, remembering that most of the conflicts seem to be taking place in the south, in the periphery. So in terms of having a real impact, it looks like we need to almost like repackage whatever is being produced or reconceptualize it so that they might use it. So I'm curious what form of collaboration, the Cyanne's, the typology or cooperation, what form would be a better kind of performing type so that the practitioners in the South maybe would be more interested in utilizing it, because then we'll see an impact. That's one question. And there's one more question. There are several questions, but I want to ask one. There is a methodology quality problem in the South. Evidence shows that. That's why the journal editors, that's the justification they always come up with. They say, hey, we can't publish from those areas because they don't send us anything legible. We can't understand it. We don't get the logic. We don't get the basics. So I wonder also what type of maybe cooperation, collaboration, whatever that is, you guys can imagine that might deal with that problem, so that the journals, maybe journal editors, would be more tolerating more work out of the periphery. How can we go beyond that almost impasse that somehow they don't produce quality things? Because it's been my experience that great ideas get sacrificed because they don't get presented in an understandable way. That understandableness is generally methodology. So what type of things maybe you could recommend in terms of collaboration? And I'll stop there. Right. Thank you again for the presentations.
So do you have a preference into who goes first?
You go first, and that's the order we've been.
Okay.
And well, and it's Turkey. She comes later.
Well, I'm happy to go first, because then I can steal all the great ideas, and then Seden has to figure out how to patch it all together. So I think you actually set us up for some really interesting discussion with those questions. So I've been kind of furiously taking notes, and I think there are kind of three main points that I would like to make. So I think when you talk about global South institutions being more resistant to some of the theorizing from the North, I think that there's both a meta, but then also a more micro way to think about that. So I think the meta discussion is the pushback towards decolonizing some of the kind of IR kind of meta theories that really came out of very specific examples and cases and traditions. We pick on Tilly all the time for a very European-based state formation theory, for example. And I think that is a really worthwhile conversation to have, right? Which is, which of the theories that we are using and building on really are coming from very specific cases without being more broadly informed of other experiences. And in my mind, the way to repackage or to reframe that is to say that the global South can't be part of these conversations unless they are part of these conversations, right? I mean, you can't decolonize a literature within your own country without kind of figuring out ways to move it into the IR mainstream. But here, I think that leads into exactly the challenge that you raised. And you can talk about that in terms of methodological sophistication. We can also talk about that in terms of gatekeeping, right? So journals that, it's not that the methods are not sophisticated, it's just the methods the journals don't want to publish or don't want to engage with. I think that's a much trickier problem. I think that the first thing I would say is having these conversations is exactly what needs to be happening, because these are the types of conversations that then push back against journal editors to say, look, you've got to figure out a way to incorporate these brilliant ideas. I'll give just a personal plug. So the International Studies Association has a new flagship journal called Global Studies Quarterly. I'm actually an associate editor in the journal, so I'm happy to answer questions specifically about that. But it has as its mandate to publish work from the Global South. And so the journal puts an incredible amount of energy into helping with that translation. So they have both folks that work across different languages to help with just language editing and things like that. But often the kind of remit of the editors is to take the ideas first and then engage with kind of the methods or the presentation second. And so really to give scholars the benefit of the doubt, right? That they are doing good work and that they are doing thoughtful work. And I've been really pleased with the success of that journal. It's also published open access. So ISA funds the open access component of it. So it's not just about incorporating global scholars, but also making sure that other folks from other areas of the world that may be less resourced in terms of journal subscriptions can also read the articles that are being written. But I do want to raise, maybe in Seden's stream, a slightly more pessimistic kind of comment to this. One of the things that I've really bumped up against in all three of the collaboration models that I've engaged with, or the research engagement models that I've participated in, has been the idea of competing benefit streams, or just kind of competing, not always complementary goals. So we've framed this conversation in terms of what academics from the Global South want is to be publishing in prominent political science venues, and incorporating their theories into IR more broadly. But I'm not always sure that that's the case with the scholars that I'm engaged in. Many of the scholars that I work with from the Global South are much more internally focused, right? So they want policy changes within their own country. They want to solve conflict dynamics within their own countries. And so they're a little bit less concerned about, you know, a Journal of Politics or an APSR article than they are about, you know, getting a good op-ed in their national newspaper, or being able to write a policy brief that is read by the Ministry of Defense. And I think those are the benefit streams that are a little bit challenging. In the first wave of this conversation, we kind of made the argument that if you're going to do a Global South collaboration, you've got to make sure that those scholars are also co-authors on your piece, right? Which is what Seden will be picking up in her kind of JPR, JCR. When I've had those collaborations, they've gone in a couple of different ways. I've definitely worked with scholars that want to get into PhD programs in the United States, and they are super excited about the idea of being on a mainstream political science publication. But I've also worked with scholars to which those articles are not currency that does much for them. It doesn't help them with promotion or something like that. It doesn't help them with consulting contracts or the other types of work they want to engage with. And so in some ways, that is a more pernicious challenge for me, because as I'm building these cooperative research projects, we really spend a lot of time talking about, like, what do you want to get out of this, right? What is the thing that would be most beneficial to you? And sometimes, you know, think tanks say to me, we just need the money, right? So we just need some extra revenue. We're going to do our own projects with that. And sometimes people say, you know, I want to be on these articles because I want to get into a PhD program. You know, the project we're working on in Mozambique, we've put together a large budget to do a really big rollout, because they want to do this kind of like massive all day, you know, full day workshop at the snazzy hotel in town, so they can invite all of the government ministers and things like that to the rollout, to really increase policy uptake for the questions that they're interested in. So I'll end there. But I think this idea of competing benefit streams is a real challenge, because I don't know that we can always assume that Global South scholars want the same thing. I don't know that it's a unified body of people that all want the same outcomes. So thank you for those excellent questions.
Thank you, Cyanne. Seden?
It is such a complicated question. I don't even know where to begin with, but this is what I'm going to say. The most important thing is, yes, there is a divide between the North and the South in terms of the questions they ask, in terms of the methods they apply. But this is not just in the North and South. I remember when I was a graduate student at UIUC, at the time, the department was, you know, the faculty members within the department had already gone into two different blocks. One was going through the quantitative methodology at the time, and the other one was still, you know, hanging on to a qualitative way of doing things and working things. And unfortunately, those guys have already retired or left the academia, and now it's all about quantitative, right? That's the Northern discourse. This is what I'm going to say. I think our biggest problem is not about the Southern scholars having their own journals in which, you know, they can apply their own questions and in their own methods, and the Northern doing the same. It's not about that. I think I always see this as a divorced couple where they have their own filters and glasses through which they look at things. And they have to just pause for a second and change those glasses. This is not so different from kind of any conflict resolution thing that we're talking about, where the South doesn't see things from the North's perspective and the North doesn't see the things from the South's perspective. It's not about who's right. It's not about who's wrong. It's the same puzzle or the same complications would emerge in any kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. If you're working with someone from psychology department, from an economics department, the way they would approach things and the methods they would employ would be widely different. And we are so fixated on the things that we learned, on the things that we believe are important, that we do not listen. And so when Cyanne was talking about, well, I was asking them what they really want, it's an amazing approach. So what I think is the problem is going back to the same thing. I think if we could create these collaborations where the people from the South and the North start working together on a project, I think we would start seeing things from each other's perspective. And I think maybe the ideal world is not a world where only, you know, the South perspective exists or where the North perspective exists, but it is a kind of interactive evolutionary perspective where we see the best of the both worlds, where the North sees things, tries to understand cases more, deeper than the way we do things, or care about the policy implications more than just the, a little section at the end of it. We write these amazing policy implications and we're done. We don't care whether it is implemented or not. But someone, a think tank or a, scholar from Somalia would really care about the meaningful changes in the solar panels and the climate change. And all we care about is finding a statistically significant result that the solar panel makes a difference. And we don't care whether people are really using the solar panels or, we don't really care. So I think these collaborations, these field trips, working together is what is going to change both of our perspectives. And we are going to evolve into a married couple from the divorced couple. I think that's what is needed. And that's going to be my final word. Oh, these things cannot be written anymore. I mean, if you put these in the journal, I will be doomed.
Yeah, I mean, the marriage thing always explains better. So, thank you for that too. Obviously it's really rich. That there are so many angles that we can look at it. Wait a minute. Sorry. In my computer, I don't see the chat section for some reason. I don't see if there are questions. But if there is anybody, that person should jump in and ask the question. But in the meantime, if there's nobody, I have one more question actually. Because when we do this this type of okay, there are questions actually. What kind of duties are expected from Global South and Global North researchers during these? Okay, now I see. All right. North-South collaborations, are there particular distinctions between their focuses, duties? What I mean is some may expect that Global North scholars develop theory and analyze the data, and while Global South scholars collect the data. Actually, that's a good question, because a lot of the times the Southerners, not only in conflict, but we think, I don't want to call us Southerners, but we think that we are the labor. Somehow the thinking and the theorizing has to take place in the North, and that's a big pain. And there are studies also. I experienced one myself when I was a graduate student. It was like I felt important only when there was an opportunity that this white man, the professor, and then the white woman, when they were interested in extra evidence for their theories, they would ask my opinion whether their theories worked in Turkey or not. So that's a deep kind of the problem. So do we still have that problem then? What would you say about this question?
Well, Gizem, I think it's an excellent question. I think that I know it is still a problem, and I know it is still a problem because when I work with some of the collaborations or cooperation projects that I go into, I often have to work really hard with the think tanks or the research centers to say, look, I'm not just interested in the data, like I want to talk through this problem with you. And so I know that there are folks coming in that have a much more extractive research style. I would go back to the earlier point that I made about kind of really talking through what both teams or both people are expecting to get out of the collaboration. One of the ways that I've overcome this in my own research, so for example, the Mozambique project is the one that I'm most familiar with because I just got back from Mozambique 2 weeks ago. We were conducting focus groups as a team. So we all went together to conduct the focus groups. But there is a heavier burden for all the reasons that Seden listed for folks in the Global South, translation and things like that. But we scheduled team meetings every evening, often over dinner or over a beer or something like that. But we scheduled team meetings every evening to talk about what we had seen or experienced in the focus groups. This was really useful for me because it allowed me to say, from a theorizing perspective, here's kind of what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking. But then it also allowed my research collaborators at the Mozambican think tank to say, no, you've got that totally wrong. That's not what I heard at all. It actually looks like this. Or you're forgetting, the upcoming election cycle, or you're not thinking about this through a tribal lens or something like that. And so I think I found those experiences to be useful in terms of kind of smoothing some of the different methodological or theoretical traditions. And the other thing to remember is I often, at this stage in my career, I'm older than a lot of the people that I'm working with. And so I often do come in with more theoretical experience and expertise as well. And that would be a problem even with working with my own graduate students in the United States, right? So I often am in a teaching role or in a professorial role just based on the experience that I've had. But that also puts the burden on me to actually have these conversations a little bit more richly. I wanted to echo Seden's point about, I don't know that I would call it marriage. I like the idea of interdisciplinary conversations, because anybody that's tried recently to work on an interdisciplinary team can vouch for how challenging it is to overcome linguistic and methodological divides. On this project that I'm working on with climate change, I don't do much on climate change. I'm a conflict scholar, but we have climate scientists on the project, and often we'll have these long conversations and get to the end of it and realize that we're talking about the exact same thing. We're just using a different word for it. And I think that that's the types of things that we can see in North-South collaborations as well. You'll be talking to, a scholar from Nepal, and they'll give you this really rich kind of detailed concept. And you'll say, oh no, we have that concept in IR. We just call it this, right? Or that's just clientelism, or that's just whatever. And then it kind of clicks all together. And then we know that we're all on the same page or talking about the same thing. And just to also echo or amplify one of Seden's points about the quantitative-qualitative divide, I think this is another point where the South in some ways falls off, because often the Global South scholars are most known for collecting really rich qualitative data, because the quality of the quantitative data is often quite poor in these contexts. And so even if these scholars wanted to engage from a quantitative perspective, the data just isn't there, right? So I'm talking exclusively in my research about things like focus groups, elite level interviews, right? That's the type of data that tends to be richer from a causal mechanism perspective out of the Global South. And as more prominent political science journals value that type of research less, or that methodological perspective less, that can also impact the publication stream. But I think this question about duties, I would push back, and as Global South scholars are also responsible for saying, here's what I want to get out of the project, and here's the type of skill sets that I can bring to the table, right? I can contribute to theory. I know that's not always an easy conversation to have, but everybody is part of the research process. Any good co-authors should be having these conversations, I think.
Right. Seden?
Yeah, very, very great question. I think I agree with Cyanne in a way that every partnership requires a kind of a pre-talk where, this is what I can bring, this is what I want. It may not be easy because someone from the South may actually need this publication and may need this work. I understand that. So there's a necessity over there that would probably make the person from the North have some kind of leverage over the South. But this is what I'm going to say. again, I mean, I'm making these analogies. The way I see this is any scholar, this is also true for the interdisciplinary work, not just for the North and the South, anyone who has different perspectives, different training, different approaches. It's like two old people saying, I am right and you're wrong. It's not so different from that, because when you look at this, scholars from the North, they do theorize. That theory needs in-depth knowledge that is coming from the local data, that is coming from the cases, that's coming from everyday life experiences, for sure. On the other hand, the person from the North, when he or she is writing the theory, needs to simplify it, needs to make assumptions. And that's the way that article is going to be published in a Northern journal. Now, the person from the South, on the other hand, I've seen this 1,000 times, and that's the way I was thinking when I was having an education in Turkey in my undergrad. We want to go in depth. And we want to bring 1,000 different perspectives on this. So there's also this, but there's also that. And then if you think about it, there's also this and there's also that. So suddenly you have 20 different ingredients that explain what you're trying to explain. So you can understand how hard it is to merge these two approaches. It's almost impossible. Again, I think the most important thing in here is, without suffocating anyone, without suffocating the Northern approach and without suffocating the Southern approach, I think the best way is to forge these kind of permanent institutionalized collaborations that are repetitive. And I think in the end, maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually these approaches are going to, I mean, this interaction is going to bring a merged approach in which, you know, there's going to be an evolved approach, which is going to have ingredients from the North and ingredients from the South. And maybe it's going to bring more tolerance to listening to each other, because right now this kind of necessity is not the way to do this. I think everybody has to be on the equal ground and equal balance. And to forge those kind of collaborations, we need a little bit more institutionalized approach, I think. We need to make this a little bit more repetitive. Eventually, it's not going to be easy, but I think both scholars can learn to listen to one another, because I know for myself that my theory is a lot better if I know what is happening in the case, for sure. There's a lot of a kind of a linkage that is coming from the case that actually improves your theory, and not the way around. So we have a lot to learn from each other, both the North and the South.
All right, that's great. Actually, we are also getting into recommendations at the micro level as well. And İlker just posted a message question, actually. How can the digital age and the availability of big data, this is important, I think, to foster the collaboration between the global North and the global South? I mean, some people, because make that claim that this big data thing maybe is resolving all this, you know, the divide North-South issue. Would you agree with that? Disagree with that? What do you think?
So at Penn State, we have the SOTA program, so the Social Data Analytics program. And so I am well versed on dissertation topics that are engaging big data in a variety of different contexts. And İlker, I actually am more pessimistic, but I think we're probably going to go through a negative wave and then back into a positive wave. So I am noticing a new round of graduate students who are able to engage big data from contexts that they are unfamiliar with, and are probably developing theories and even research questions that are not particularly well informed by the case. So if we think about things like being able to grab telegraph data or Twitter data or something like that from places, from unique contexts. So we can think about, you know, authoritarian studies in China or Russia, for example. I think that we're going to start out with a phase of big data being used in a way that is not informed by context. But hopefully, as with many of our questions, we'll kind of swing back into a more informed, a more informed place. So I think, I'm sure that there will eventually be advantages, but at least for right now, I'm a little bit more pessimistic in terms of the limitations, only because I'm witnessing many scholars using data that they can gather more easily from a variety of different contexts that's not particularly informed by setting.
I am definitely going to second that. I definitely think the same way. And there is more. I think it's going to make a lot of people sit behind their desktops, do these kind of data retrievals without understanding the content. And now we have DeepL, so we do not also need the language. God knows what we're putting over there because we think that we've translated it so well. And so if you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of information and meaning that's going to be lost even through this translation. We don't need a local person anymore. I mean, that's what the scholars from the North are going to think about. There's no need to do the field trip. There's no need to gather local data. There's no need to ask a local expert because everything is online and everything can be translated and everything can be interpreted, obviously wrongly, but it will be interpreted. So I think this is not a good development. I'm hoping that it is exactly, it's going to go somewhere where maybe it's going to include more local collaborators. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I don't think it's a very good development in the same way. There is also, the second thing is now we know that there's so much misinformation. We don't even know whether the data that we're collecting is actually correct information or not. So a lot of them also is going to be lost within the misinformation landscape. And we're not going to know whether this information is correct or not if we're not working with a local expert.
There are actually more questions, but one small thing I wanted to add for the big data thing. We just, as the Turkish Fulbright Commission, we had to make an agreement with one of these big data global companies. And in that, I don't know, the lawyers went through in the agreement and all that. There, I faced this brutal reality of how this big data thing is a business. And then that's why I feel very pessimistic myself too, that how, I don't know, how anything good can come out of such a extremely business-driven something. So Deniz is asking a question actually. There is a substantial transformation in terms of methodology as studies align more with quantitative methods. This is more visible in the North, yet there seems to be a transfer of this transformation to the South through personal ties, such as PhD student graduates returning to the South from the North. That really sounds like colonialistic, but okay. So I wonder, to what extent do you find this transfer of methodology sustainable and also improvable? There's another question, I think a little bit related. Yaşar Hoca, actually, Yaşar Sarı is asking, why do we need to divide the academic world, colonial term, North-South? We can divide academic world or works based on other criteria. I think a wrong way to start to talk about current academic conditions. So let's see, Anne. Let's come.
So let me start with Yaşar's comment. I think you're absolutely right. And so I am struggling in my own head with whether we're talking about like host country or kind of sender country. In my mind, the biggest research divide, at least in my work, is resource-based. Right. So and that doesn't necessarily have to be North-South, but it's which countries have the most amount of either federal or private donor funds for conducting different types of research. So the kind of colonial nature, if we want to think about it in terms of the research I do, is that I often, through Penn State and through the US government, have access to larger quantities of research funds than my research partners in places like Mozambique. So I come in with the money, and that, to Seden's point, is the power dynamic and inequities that I often see. So I'm happy to use other terms other than North-South. I'm not quite sure the right way to do it, but it's something about kind of host and sender when it comes to resources. Deniz, I think that your comment is also spot on. This is what Seden is talking about in terms of these personal ties and where people are moving around in terms of publishing collaborations, but it absolutely applies to methodology. You know, I mean, and certainly the center that you are working with and through is a great example of that, right? So there are scholars that are trained in more quantitative traditions that are bringing it back to the students there in Bilkent. And so I think that is a way to improve, but I think if we're going to tie it back to Yasser's question, it's improve on what, right? So it's make research by Turkish or South-based scholars, however you want to think about it, more palatable or more marketable to Northern political science journals. And that may not be the goal in the long term, because if the goal is to transform research in a way that recolonizes it in some ways, right? You may lose the great ideas that Ersul was talking about earlier, right? These kind of brilliant theoretical contributions that are coming from local conflict contexts.
I'm also going to start with the second question, because actually before I was preparing this talk, I was thinking about the same thing. Maybe the North-South divide is not really what we're trying to get in here. And when we're talking about locally sensitive information, what we really need to get in here is, well, we need to do research. And we're doing the research in somewhere, a location that we're not residing in. There is a local sensitive information. So there's a conflict zone, and then there's a location in which you're nicely sitting in, looking at your laptop and trying to interpret data, but you're not really in the required context. So when I was coding that data, I was thinking, well, is it that so important that I am classifying Turkey as opposed to South Korea, which sounds like a northern country, not sounds like, but is a north, but still the idea is the same. If we're doing research in South Korea, right, we need to be there to conduct this research, and we need to be collaborating with someone that is from South Korea. Whether it's a north or a south doesn't really matter. It is about enriching the quality of the research, and to enrich the quality of the research, we need the diverse perspectives, we need the local perspective, and we do need the resources maybe that the northern scholar can bring. So all of it has to come together to improve the quality of this work. So coming to the second question, definitely, again, and this is exactly what's happening right now in Turkey too. A lot of the universities are teaching research methods class, are teaching big computation data, and all of these methodologies are the methodologies that Northern scholars are using. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But this is a very one-sided relationship. So it's okay for the Southern scholars to learn and, put those glasses on and to see from the perspective of the North. But what about the North putting some of those glasses and seeing from the perspective of the South? Unless it's a two-sided relationship, we cannot evolve as a scholar. So we need more of the reverse, bringing the scholars to the Southern part and, getting deep into this kind of a cultural context, getting deep into the interpretation of this cultural context, and that, context cannot be generalized all the time. So getting into the localization of the context a little bit, thinking about the depth of the theory, thinking about the depth of the study before writing the theory section. So this is good. There's nothing wrong with that. And this is going very well, but the other side is missing. So I hope that in the future, we're also going to be able to bring that side into the equation as well.
Actually, great. We're doing overtime, even we had an hour in mind, but I just following up on what actually Seden was saying, I have also a comment to make. And also it's related to Yaşar's point, actually. Why do we have to have a divide? I am one of those who thinks that we really have to have a divide. We have to face that reality, because in reality, it's a dependent relationship. Somebody produces, it looks like, the other one is consuming. And the unacceptable thing is this, that is, if it were just a product, a Coca-Cola or something that, somebody would produce, the other one would consume, that's fine. But this product is supposed to be about the consumers as well. And with respect to conflict studies, even IR, security studies, even more of it is about the consumer. So that's the part I think unacceptable. That's why we have to divide it. We have to somehow describe it in a dichotomous way, either it's north, south, or core, periphery, because it's a dependent, unfortunately, it's a dependent relationship. Related to that, I would like to ask a very small practical question. I don't know, in conflict studies, I mean, has there been any concept really majorly accepted by the literature and studied yet it was introduced and produced by the periphery. A major concept, because with respect to IR theories, I'll give you some news actually, we are all familiar with. Among all of the IR theories, there was only the dependency theory, a little bit, came from not necessarily core, even though it has some core connection, and it has been largely now discredited, even dropped by the core journals, and nothing else. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if that was the case for also conflict studies. So then the question is, how does that really happen? Do you think the journals, core journals, are ever ready to accept anything conceptual from the peripheral scholarship? I don't know. That didn't sound like a question. Sorry. It was
Well,
a question.
I don't know that I have an answer. So I can't think of very many prominent conflict scholars from the Global South period, right? So when we think about kind of the big names, I mean, we have some folks from maybe Southern Europe that I would kind of put on the list, but not many. And I don't know that it's. I don't even think that I would conceptualize some of the theory generation issues as north-south. I mean, the major theories that are well accepted in American political science journals are coming from 3 or 4 major elite institutions, right? I mean, so these are Ivy League major elite institutions. And I think that we're still in a paradigm where there are prominent people that are allowed to make theories and the rest of us get to test those theories. And I don't know that that's even north-south. I mean, I think that that's institution-based. So Don, I can't tell if you're shaking your head or agreeing or disagreeing with me.
I definitely agree. I'm thinking, thank God she's going first.
I think
So,
there is a hegemony within the core. There is a periphery within the core, and imagine being the periphery of the periphery.
Of the periphery.
See, that's why even north-south doesn't cut it. You have to almost like describe it kind of poorer of the poor, and then that's a kind of and almost like you end up saying that it has to be a trickling down impact somehow, and one day the horse is gonna eat it, and then maybe as birds, maybe eventually will get benefit. But it's all right. So I think we don't want to take more of your time, obviously, because I was told that this was going to be an hour. All right, İlker, that's the case, right? All right.
Well, can I just, Gizem, ask about the potential positive results? I can end on a positive note, which is to say that I have found almost all of my collaborations to be incredibly fruitful. I learn a ton, and I believe that my collaborators also learn a ton, but mostly I think we produce excellent research. The research is much better for the collaboration than it would be if I was toiling alone on my computer in State College in the middle of winter. And so I think, you know, in my mind, it is all positive, Gizem. I think that we have just identified places where we can improve upon the model, but the goal is clear and the goal is solid, and it will generate better research for conflicts and peace studies more broadly when we do this right.
Can I just say a few concluding words also about the last thing that has been said about the periphery of the periphery? And so this is my personal idea. I don't think we should have a north-south divide. The reason why I don't think is with everything that I believe, the more divides we put, the more those boundaries become so hardened that we keep feeding into this idea that there is a north and there is a south. I'd rather look at this as how can the scholarship, global scholarship, improve in life. And I think that once we start having these distinctions, it's like 2 countries and now very hard borders, and we cannot cross it with this kind of a distinction. I'd rather look at a scholar and not worry about whether he's coming or she's coming from the north or the south, and just see what, you know, how we can have this kind of partnership. Because some of the issues that we're facing, everybody's facing, we're also facing it in the north. Yes, maybe not to that extent, but I think it's about how we can improve this general global scholarship and how we can improve the quality of the work and how we can actually get beyond the publication pace where we need to publish so much that we don't really care about what goes into the theory or what goes into the policy implications, but we really do more meaningful, in-depth work. So the whole scholarship has to change. And the question about, are there any concepts that are produced in the North, concepts from the South? I don't know. I mean, as Cyanne said, there are a lot of concepts that the North doesn't accept within the other North. One of the reasons is because what is accepted, unfortunately, is about the pop culture. So is it getting into the best journals? How many citations is it getting? Is this scholar very highly networked, and does everybody know it? And so it's one of those really classical, what makes a product very, popular on the market. There is nothing more than that. So I really don't, it's not about the concept being taken from the South and being popular on the North. It's about actually disrupting this idea about a pop culture, because we're trying to produce knowledge in here. It's not about the popularity of it. And the concept doesn't have to be very popular as long as it's meaningful and as long as, it makes contribution to the quality of the knowledge. So I think the whole scholarship needs to be restructured. That's what I'm thinking. That's it, and I thank you all for inviting me.
Excellent, actually. I'm thankful too. Extremely thankful, and I hope one day whatever we're gonna call it, this global South, or whoever is at the bottom of the bottom will revolt. Otherwise, the top guys, those white guys, particularly the theory producers, have no incentives to change their practice. It requires a revolution. That's what I'm thinking, because I'm older. Okay, then I lost the hope. Okay, I'm extremely thankful to everybody for the center to do this series, and for the contributors, and then those who asked the questions. These were beautiful presentations and beautiful, and in every sense, I'm so looking forward to the end. The end product out of this, because I'm so interested in reading it line by line and even asking further questions. So the last of this series is going to be on the March 12th, and we would love to have everybody to come in, listen to it, and also be part of this lively discussion, which itself is the collaboration or cooperation, whichever is the best form in that typology. I'm really thankful, Cyanne, and I'm very thankful to Seden, and also everybody else. Good evening in here, and also have a good day in there. So, okay then.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Thank you.